Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the hard, cracked shoes of someone history tried to forget. You're about to wake up in a place that smells like boiled cabbage and disinfectant, where your name doesn't matter and even your shoes might be taken from you. This isn't a dream. It's a Victorian workhouse, and you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes crack open to a dim, gray morning. Cold stone presses into your spine through the thin straw mattress. You shiver. Not because of the temperature, although yes, it's absolutely freezing, but because something in your bones knows you're not in your bed. Not even close. You sit up slowly. All around you, other shapes stir. Men, mostly. Thin. Pale. All sleeping in rough rows like dominoes, most wrapped in scratchy woolen blankets, some just curled in on themselves. The smell hits you next, mildew, unwashed bodies, something sharp and soapy that does not quite mask the scent of human misery. There's no privacy. No bedroom. Just a ward. A cavernous room with a high ceiling, barred windows, and a kind of gray light that doesn't feel like morning, it feels like surrender. A bell rings. Loud and shrill. It doesn't invite you to wake, it commands it. A uniformed figure strides in. He's the workhouse master. Tall, tight-lipped, and wearing a coat that's far too nice for this place. His voice booms like he's used to not being questioned. Rise. You've had your rest. You earn your keep here. Let's see you do it. You clamber out of bed and your bare feet hit the stone floor like two startled pigeons. The cold bites hard. You stand because everyone else is already up, and you don't want to be noticed. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Next to you, an older man hacks up a cough that sounds like it's trying to leave his body permanently. You edge away. There's no mirror here, but one look down at yourself confirms that you're wearing something unfamiliar, coarse fabric, shapeless and brown, with buttons that don't line up right. It smells of lie and defeat. Your pockets are empty, because of course they are. Someone bumps your arm and mutters, "First time." You nod. He chuckles, but it's a tired chuckle. It gets worse. There's no coffee. No toast. No kind voice saying good morning. Instead, you're herded down a corridor that echoes with every shuffling footstep. Doors are bolted open, like they're afraid of what people might do if they closed. You pass a notice on the wall. Rules of the workhouse. No talking during labor. No loitering. No questions. You get the feeling those rules aren't just suggestions. The dining hall. Or whatever you'd call a giant room with wooden benches and the aroma of despair, is already half full. Women in separate rows. Children even further off. The segregation is strict and not just symbolic. You're cattle, but even cattle are sorted better. A woman stands at the front. The matron. She has a stare like a hawk and arms folded so tightly, you suspect they've been that way since 1834. Her bonnet is immaculate. Her patience is not. Sit, she says, and trays are slammed onto the table by younger staff who look only slightly less miserable than the inmates. Your breakfast is gray. Technically it's porridge, but it tastes like someone boiled wallpaper paste and added a single, solitary oat for good luck. You try to eat slowly, but there's no time for savoring. This isn't a meal. It's a refueling station. Somewhere in the back, a child sneezes and earns a snap of the matron's fingers. Control yourself, she scolds, as if illness is a personal failing. Historians still argue whether workhouses were designed more for reform or punishment, but sitting here, chewing something you'd feed a horse with a grudge, you're leaning toward punishment. As you force the last spoonful down, you notice the other inmates watching the staff, not with hope, but calculation. Everyone's gauging who might snap next, who's most likely to enforce discipline with a cane, and who might look away if someone pockets an extra bread crust. You catch sight of a small bulletin pinned near the exit: any inmate caught malingering shall receive reduced rations and additional labor. You don't know what malingering even means right now, but you understand the threat just fine. A man across from you with hollow cheeks and eyes too old for his face leans in and whispers, "They say if you die here, they just take your boots and give him to someone else before your body's cold." You want to laugh. But he's not joking. The bell rings again. Work begins in 15 minutes. You don't even know what your job is yet. But your stomach's already twisting. Welcome to your new life, where freedom is measured in how quietly you can pass the time, and hope is rationed thinner than the porridge. You barely register the shift from eating to marching. There's no moment to breathe, no break to ask questions. Once the breakfast bowls are scraped empty, some licked cleaner than others, you're herded like reluctant livestock out of the dining hall, into the freezing air of the central yard. A gust of wind slips straight through your ill-fitting uniform. Even your bones shiver. A whistle blows. Everyone stops. Men and boys to the left. Women and girls to the right. The sorting is swift, practiced, and absolute. You glance toward the women's line and see them doing the same, scanning for familiar faces, loved ones, or even just a kind expression. But nothing lingers. The staff enforce separation with hawk-like eyes and an arm's-length stick, as if affection might be contagious. A young man beside you mutters, "They say one couple tried to pass a note last year. Didn't see each other for a month after that. Solitary. Both." You file into another brick building, this one humming with movement and steam. The workhouse doesn't waste time on welcome tours or explanations. You're directed to a table, handed a blunt wooden tool, and pointed toward a large sack of rough fibers. Oakum. Ah, yes. You've heard of this before. Picking oakum. A phrase so Victorian it might as well come with a top hat and tuberculosis. Turns out, it's not metaphorical. It means exactly what it sounds like, tearing apart old ship ropes, fiber by fiber, using only your hands. The goal: make the old rope reusable for caulking the hulls of ships. You pick up a hunk of the stiff rope. It smells of salt and tar. You dig your fingers in, and the first pull is already painful. The strands don't want to come apart. Your skin does. Keep going, a voice snaps behind you. A woman in a starched collar is watching you already. 1 ounce per hour. That's the minimum. You glance at the scale near the front. It doesn't look forgiving. The man next to you, same one who warned you about the boots, lets out a low hiss as a strand slices under his nail. Told you it gets worse. Your fingertips burn. Within minutes they're raw. Half an hour in, and they're bleeding. This is how you'll earn your gruel, then. Across the hall, through a narrow archway, you catch sight of the men assigned to stone breaking, sledgehammers rising and falling in a numbing rhythm. Some prefer that work. Others fear it. The rumor is, if you're weak, the stones break you back. Gender decides much of the labor. Men break rocks or chop wood. Women sew, wash, or strip feathers. Children, tragically, do both. And they're expected to be just as fast. You hear a whip crack of reprimand echo from the sewing room and a soft sob that follows. But no one flinches. That's part of the routine. Every hour, a bell rings. Not to stop. Just to measure time. You keep picking. Pulling. Straining. The rope seems endless. The tiny scale doesn't seem to move at all. You steal a glance around. Most people aren't even talking, not out of focus, but fear. Talking equals punishment. Or at least, suspicion. And suspicion can lead to reduced rations, solitary, or worse, being labeled a malcontent. Historians still argue whether the oakum-picking quota was physically possible, or intentionally designed to be just out of reach. You know what you believe. Because it's not just the pain. It's the pointlessness. All this, just to remind you who's in charge. The light filtering in from the high windows is colorless. Hours pass, but they blur together, stitched into the ache in your neck, the swelling in your fingers, and the constant creak of benches and bones. At one point, your stomach growls so loudly the man beside you chuckles, "Ah. That's the dinner bell, right there." You try to smile, but it's hard to move your mouth when everything else already hurts. A little girl passes by with a pail of water. She looks about 9 but walks like she's much older. Eyes too serious. Steps too careful. She places the pail at the center of the hall and slips away. No one thanks her. Gratitude is not rationed here either. You dunk your sore hands into the water. It's lukewarm and cloudy. Maybe 3 people have used it before you. Doesn't matter. It stings like vinegar, but at least it's wet. By now, the fibers you were picking have turned reddish at the edges. Not from dye. From you. At last, a bell rings again. This one, mercifully, is for stopping. The overseer strides between rows, peering at each inmate's pile of oakum and jotting notes on a little clipboard, like a grim Victorian Santa. Yours? He squints. Then frowns. First day, someone offers quietly, on your behalf. The overseer doesn't reply. Just walks on. But you know what that look means. No extra bread tonight. Maybe even half rations. Your shoulders sag as you stand up. Your knees pop. You haven't moved in so long it feels like your body forgot how to unfold. A joke flits into your head, uninvited, on the bright side, no emails today. You almost laugh. Almost. You fall into line again. Tomorrow, you're told, you might get the laundry room. Or the bone yard. Or the needle station. A little variety, then. How luxurious. But for now, it's time for supper, if you can call it that. The line to the evening meal isn't really a line, it's more of a resigned shuffle. No talking. No eye contact. Just the sound of shoes scuffing stone and the occasional suppressed cough or stomach gurgle. You follow the back of the person in front of you as though your life depends on it. In a way, it does. You haven't seen a clock all day, but the shadows outside say late afternoon. Inside, time is measured in hunger. You're led into a different hall this time. Not quite the grand dining room of earlier, but a narrow annex with low ceilings, dripping pipes, and walls stained by 1,000 overboiled meals. It smells like fatigue. A thin, humorless woman with rolled sleeves and a ladle stands behind a giant metal cauldron. You don't know her name, and you're not sure you're supposed to. She serves in silence. Slop, 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 each portion identical in its sadness. A watery stew, floating with root vegetables so overcooked they've given up all texture. If there's meat in it, it's hiding like a fugitive. You hold out your tin bowl. She glances at you once, then drops in your portion with the same care one might give a brick into a pond. You step aside. There are no spoons left. You're told to wait. When one finally becomes available, it's warm from someone else's hands. You wipe it on your sleeve and hope the germs are afraid of oakum-picking fingers. You sit on a wooden bench beside 2 other men. They don't speak. They just eat. You take your first bite. The flavor is, Think of it as essence of boiled indifference, with subtle notes of turnip despair. You chew, because chewing is better than thinking. The man next to you lets out a soft sigh. Used to be a fishmonger, he says to no one in particular. Now I'm just a number. He doesn't elaborate. You nod as if that means anything. At a table nearby, a woman sneezes. Instantly, a junior matron appears from the shadows like a Victorian ninja. "Cover your mouth," she hisses. The woman mutters an apology, and the matron walks away, probably satisfied that disease has been thoroughly chastised. You glance down at your uniform again. Now that you're sitting still, you can feel just how rough the fabric is. It's thick, coarse wool, stiff as canvas and somehow still threadbare in spots. It doesn't fit. None of it fits. The trousers are too short, the sleeves too long, and the collar itches like punishment. Historians still argue whether these uniforms were meant to standardize or dehumanize, but sitting here, clutching your bowl with raw hands and a red ring around your neck from the wool, you think, why not both? A child nearby fidgets with her tunic. It hangs on her like a curtain. She tugs it down over her knees every few seconds, as though modesty will protect her from everything else she can't control. Suddenly, there's a crash. A boy, not more than 7, has dropped his bowl. It rolls across the floor like a tiny, tragic wheel of fortune. The room freezes. He scrambles to grab it, scooping up the slop with his bare hands. The matron storms over, lips already pursed. "Clean it up." "No seconds," she says sharply. Then, to the room, clumsiness is waste. Waste is sin. He doesn't cry. That might be the worst part. He just nods and kneels, gathering his dinner back into the bowl with slow, careful fingers. The other children don't watch. They've seen this before. You push away the last few bites of your own stew. Your stomach complains, but your guilt is louder. Once the bowls are collected, you're marched back to the dormitory. The same stone floor. The same thin bedding. But not the same you. Your hands ache. Your feet throb. Your body feels like it belongs to someone else, someone less lucky. The matron stands at the entrance. She's holding a ledger. Stripped for inspection. The order drops like a bucket into a well. Everyone begins to undress, folding their uniforms and placing them on the end of the bed. You follow suit. The air is sharp against your skin. Goosebumps ripple across your arms. You cover yourself as much as possible, but modesty here is another luxury denied. She walks the rows, checking elbows, ankles, behind the ears. You don't dare move. One man receives a sharp rap on the knuckles for unwashed fingernails. Another is told to sleep on the floor until his attitude improves. Then, your turn. She scans you like a ledger entry. Blistered fingers, she notes aloud. Poor output. A frown. New. You nod. It's all you can do. She moves on. Afterward, you're handed a clean uniform for tomorrow. Slightly less stained. Slightly less threadbare. Congratulations. You dress quickly, grateful just to be warm again. As you crawl into bed, the straw pokes at your sore muscles like a joke you're too tired to understand. The room fills with rustling bodies and quiet groans. Somewhere, someone mumbles in their sleep. Another whispers a prayer. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling. Counting cracks. You wonder what day it is. What time? What version of yourself would believe this if you told them? Eventually, exhaustion drags you under. But sleep here isn't peace, it's just the absence of sound. Welcome to your second night. The morning bell slices through your sleep like a blade. It's not a gentle chime or a slow crescendo, it's a jarring clang that yanks you out of your dreams and reminds you, once again, where you are. Victorian Workhouse. Third day. No coffee. No kindness. You sit up slowly, every muscle protesting like it's been pickled overnight. The straw mattress is no softer than before, and the dampness in the air seems to have multiplied. You don't remember falling asleep. You barely remember your name. A man across from you groans as he pulls on his boots. Fingers still bleeding, he asks, not unkindly. You look down at your hands. The fingertips are raw. Tiny slits crisscross your skin like a poorly written letter. Yep, you mutter. Good. Means they still work. You almost laugh. After the usual routine, wash basin, new uniform, thin porridge, you're assigned to a new post for the day. No oakum picking. No stone breaking. Instead, you're sent to the laundry block. You don't know whether to feel relieved or afraid. The laundry is a hot, damp chamber where windows fog up from steam and the air tastes like lye and sweat. You walk in and are immediately hit with the scent of old soap, scorched cloth, and something that might once have been lemon. A large metal boiler bubbles in the corner like a cauldron plotting revenge. The matron here is different, short, stocky, with a bun so tight it seems to hold up her entire posture. She hands you a washboard, a bar of soap, and a basket overflowing with shirts, drawers, and cloth rags. Some of them soiled. Some barely holding together. Separate by class, she barks. Upper paupers, lower paupers. Officials. No mixing. You blink. There are classes of paupers. She glares. Of course. What are we, savages? Right. Naturally. Historians still argue whether the internal hierarchies within workhouses were a reflection of outside society or an invented control mechanism. You're starting to believe it was both. Nothing reinforces obedience like making the poor rank themselves. You start scrubbing. The washboard is unforgiving. The soap stings your cuts. Every shirt you wash smells like something different, one like vinegar, another like ash, a third like nothing at all, which somehow feels worse. Around you, women and men work in silence, elbow to elbow, rinsing, scrubbing, folding. The boiler hisses and bubbles, like it's disapproving of your form. You glance up and notice the segregation again. Women on one side of the laundry block, men on the other. No crossing the invisible line. You wonder what would happen if someone did. You don't try it. The hours drag. You find your rhythm, dip, scrub, wring, fold, but your body's rhythm doesn't like it. Your arms ache. Your back protests. The shirt you're cleaning seems to weigh more than a human child. You steal a glance at a teenage girl across the aisle. She's hanging sheets with robotic precision, her fingers moving faster than yours even though they're cracked and red. She doesn't look at anyone. She doesn't speak. You wonder if she's always been like this or if the laundry block turned her into a ghost. Someone drops a sheet. It lands in a puddle. A staff member swoops in, barking orders. The girl's eyes widen. She bends to retrieve it, only to have the sheet snatched away and her name, what little of it she still owns, written in the punishment book. Later, you find out she'll be denied dinner for that. And extra work tomorrow. Clean laundry, dirty justice. By mid-afternoon, you've rinsed and wrung your way through more garments than you thought existed. Each one makes your hands scream. Your shoulders sag. But you don't stop. You can't. There's a rhythm to surviving here, and breaking it is dangerous. Eventually, the matron calls time. You carry a stack of damp shirts to the drying room, which is little more than a hot chamber with lines strung across it like a spiderweb. You hang the garments carefully, mindful of wrinkles and drips. You don't know why, but something about it feels sacred. Maybe it's the closest thing you have to order. The girl across the aisle walks past. Her expression is unreadable. But for a moment, her hand brushes against yours. You both flinch, accidental contact. No one saw. Probably. You return to your place. Silence wraps itself around the room like steam. Once the last towel is folded, you're sent outside to air off. That means standing in the courtyard, damp and sore, staring at nothing until the bell rings again. The idea is to dry off your sweat so you don't carry it back into the dormitories. Or maybe just to remind you what the sky looks like. It's gray today. Surprise. The man next to you is humming something, very softly. A tune you almost recognize. Maybe an old hymn or nursery song. You want to hum along, but that could count as talking. Or, worse, joy. Eventually, the bell calls you in. Supper. The same gray stew. A stale piece of bread. You eat with your head down. Your hands are too sore to grip the spoon tightly. The crust scrapes the roof of your mouth. You eat it anyway. You don't remember much else about the evening. You change into your night tunic. Crawl into your straw. Shut your eyes. Your dreams smell like soap and blood. You wake up to the familiar clang of the morning bell and the sour taste of sleep in your mouth. But something's different today. It's quieter, eerily so. As you sit up, blinking against the early gray, you notice the dormitory isn't as full. A few bunks are empty. No bags packed. No goodbyes. Just gone. No one speaks of it. Maybe they left. Maybe they didn't. You pull on your stiff uniform, the same scratchy wool that refuses to soften, and join the slow procession to breakfast. The porridge is somehow even thinner this morning, more water than food. You imagine the oats being waved over the pot like incense rather than added in any meaningful amount. The air is colder, the line slower, and you feel it, something's off. Instead of being sent to the laundry or Oakham again, you're redirected. A different door. A different world. Children's ward. You hesitate at the threshold. It's quieter than you expected. Less chaotic. But not in a peaceful way, more like a library built on sorrow. A matron, younger than the others and slightly less harrowing in expression, beckons you in. You'll be assisting today, she says simply. Help keep them focused. Keep them silent. If they talk, they're punished. If you talk, you are. You nod. Inside the ward, long rows of children sit at low wooden tables. They're sewing, folding paper, sorting buttons, or threading needles, any number of repetitive, numbing tasks. None of them look up when you walk in. They're all around 5 to 12 years old, though most appear younger than they probably are. Hunger shrinks you from the inside. You walk past a girl with hair cropped close to her head. She's maybe 8. Her hands are trembling as she threads a needle. You want to help her, but you don't know if touching is allowed. So you just crouch beside her and whisper, breathe. Try again. She glances at you, startled. Then back down. The needle slips through. She doesn't smile, but her shoulders loosen. A victory. Don't speak to them, the matron snaps behind you, as if she's got eyes in the back of her skull. They're here to learn discipline. Right. Of course. Discipline over comfort. Uniformity over individuality. You move on. A boy in the corner is coughing, deep, rattling, the kind that sounds like it's coming from under the floorboards. The other children scoot away from him, subtly, trained by habit more than fear. You step toward him instinctively, but the matron blocks your way. He's been seen, she says coldly. Back to work. Historians still argue whether the purpose of child labor in workhouses was educational or purely economic. In this room, it's not a debate. They're cheap labor, small hands for small stitches. Childhood traded for a meager meal and a shared mattress. You glance at a poster on the wall. Idleness is the mother of all vice. A lovely motto, if you want your entire worldview sponsored by cruelty. One child stands abruptly and walks toward the matron, holding out a frayed piece of cloth. He's small, maybe 6, and clearly trying to hold in tears. I messed up, he says, his voice shaking. She doesn't look up. Just takes the cloth, tosses it aside, and says, do it again. He returns to his seat. No sobbing. Just trembling. Later, during break, which is really just 5 minutes of standing in the corner with hands behind backs, you notice something unusual. One of the older boys is sketching in the dust on a windowsill with his finger. Not letters. Not numbers. A bird. A little bird with wide wings and a tilted beak. It's the most beautiful thing you've seen since arriving. He notices you watching and quickly wipes it away. Smart. Beauty is suspicious here. You go to help with sweeping, and in the broom closet, you spot a pile of worn toys. A doll with missing eyes. A wooden horse with one leg. A tin whistle, bent in half. They're not allowed to play, the matron says, startling you. Those are for appearances. We keep them in case of inspection. Inspections. Of course. You'd nearly forgotten the outside world existed. That this place has to appear decent to survive scrutiny. After lunch, which is exactly like breakfast but slightly salter, or is that just tears, you return to the ward. The children continue their tasks, slower now. Fatigue seeps into everything. A small girl finally drops her needle and lets out a tiny, frustrated sigh. You move toward her, ready to say something, anything, but a snap of fingers stops you. The matron is there, eyes sharp. Insubordination, she mutters. The child is escorted out. No yelling. No resistance. Just quiet defeat. You don't see her return. The rest of the day, the tension lingers like smoke. No one makes eye contact. Not even the older ones. They've already learned the safest face is the blank one. By evening, you're back in the adult dormitory, the children replaced by aching joints and coughing men. But their faces stay with you. The drawings in dust. The doll with no eyes. The needle-pricked fingers of a girl too young to write her own name. You lie down and try to sleep, but your dreams are full of small hands reaching out, and rules that won't let you hold them. The air feels heavier this morning, even before the bell rings. There's a thickness to it, not just the fog of damp breath and unwashed wool, but a tension, like the workhouse is holding its breath. You sit up slower than usual. Your body is learning the choreography of exhaustion, how to bend without flinching, how to rise without making noise, how to avoid catching the matron's eye. No one speaks, of course. That's the first rule. And today, you'll understand just how seriously they mean it. After the usual watery breakfast and routine inspection, one man is reprimanded for a suspiciously idle pillow. You're sent to labor. Oakum again. You groan inwardly. Your fingers are still healing from last time. You return to the work hall, your hands already twitching. The ropes are piled like collapsed skeletons. You take your seat and begin pulling the coarse fibers apart, already bracing for the sting. 10 minutes in, it begins. A man, middle-aged, grizzled beard, one eye slightly closed, leans over to the young man beside him and whispers something. It's just a whisper. You don't even hear what it is. But you see the reaction. The younger man stiffens. Doesn't respond. Looks straight ahead. Seconds later, the sound of boots. A guard approaches. What was said? The guard asks sharply. Silence. Speak. Still nothing. You hold your breath. Talking during labor, the guard declares, loud enough for the entire room to hear. You know the rules. The older man starts to speak, maybe to explain, maybe to deny it. But he's already being pulled from the bench. Everyone watches, but no one looks. You don't look either. Not directly. You just listen. He's marched out of the room. The door slams. The echo seems to ring longer than it should. Work resumes. No one mentions it. No one dares. But later, in the yard, whispers flutter like paper caught in wind. They're putting him on the treadmill, someone murmurs. You frown. The what? Another nods toward the eastern wing of the compound. Punishment machine. Useless. Just walks and walks and walks. Like a hamster wheel for sins. You thought that was a myth. Something people said to scare newcomers. Turns out, it's very real. The tread wheel, or discipline mill, as the guards smugly call it, is a massive, rotating cylinder with wooden steps built into it. Inmates sentenced to it must walk for hours, their feet constantly lifting to keep up with the slow, grinding turn. If you fall behind, the mechanism keeps going. So do your bruises. It was supposedly invented to instill discipline and break laziness. Historians still argue whether it served any function at all beyond breaking spirits. From what you hear, the only thing it ever powered was shame. By late afternoon, you're passing through the yard when you catch a glimpse through the barred door. There he is. The man from this morning. Face red, soaked in sweat. Gripping the side rails. Legs moving with mechanical exhaustion. A guard stands nearby, tapping his baton rhythmically against his boot. No one stops to look. Looking can become participation. And participation gets noticed. You don't realize you've paused until a matron calls out, "Move along." You move. That evening, the dining room is unusually silent. Even more than usual. The man doesn't return for supper. The younger man, the one he whispered to, sits very still, staring at his bowl. His hands are shaking. You notice because you're sitting across from him, and his spoon keeps clinking against the side. You lean forward just a little and whisper, "You okay?" He looks up sharply. Wide eyes. Fear. You back off. Sorry. He doesn't speak. Just stands, leaves half his meal, and walks away. A guard watches him go. Then watches you. You keep your head down for the rest of the meal. Later that night, back in the dormitory, a low moan wakes you. It's the older man. He's back, but only just. He's collapsed on his mattress, barely moving. His hands are scraped. His eyes glassy. His lips are moving, but no sound comes out. A staff nurse leans over him, checks his pulse, frowns. Then walks away. That's it, someone whispers near you. You don't respond. You're already learning not to. Lights out. The dormitory goes quiet. But in the darkness, you hear it, slow, ragged breathing from the man's bunk. And then nothing. You don't sleep much after that. The silence here isn't just a rule, it's a weapon. A tool. It fills the gaps between suffering and hides the sound of spirits breaking. You wonder how many others whispered once, and were never heard again. You wake up to the dull clang of the morning bell, but today it hits different. Not louder, just emptier. A strange hollowness vibrates through the iron sound. The bunk where the whispering man lay last night is empty. His threadbare blanket is folded, oddly neat. No one says a word. You wonder if he died. You wonder if he was moved. You wonder if wondering is dangerous. No time to linger on it. The day has begun, and today, you're being reassigned. You're told it's laundry duty, and the matron says it like she's handing you a medal. You get marched to a dim stone room that smells of damp lye and boiled misery. Laundry in the Victorian Workhouse is not a delicate affair. There are no scented beads, no cheery cotton commercials here. Just giant vats of water, heaving with gray froth, and garments so crusted with sweat and dirt they practically stand on their own. These aren't just clothes. They're layered stories of struggle, and most of them reek. You join the line of women and men scrubbing until their knuckles go raw, wringing out blankets so soaked they feel like sodden corpses, and hauling baskets that seem to grow heavier the more you breathe. You think your old job folding shirts at a shop back home was laundry. You were playing. This is war. One woman, a wiry figure with a scar down one cheek and a permanent squint, leans over to you during a moment of pause. New to the washroom? She asks, her voice dry as linen. You nod. She grunts. Don't linger. Steam gets in your chest. And if you catch workhouse lung, they'll just send you back to Oakham. You want to laugh, but her tone isn't joking. Workhouse lung isn't a real diagnosis, exactly, but it's what they call the constant, shallow cough you pick up here. It never goes away. Historians still argue whether it came from mold, from soap fumes, or just despair, probably a nice cocktail of all three. By midday, your hands are blistered, your hair smells like ash water, and you've learned to loathe the phrase, rinse and wring. There is no end to laundry. Even when it's done, it's not done. Clothes come back dirtier, thinner, more desperate. You spend part of the afternoon starching collars for the master's table. These belong to men who eat roast beef and plum pudding while you chew boiled oats that somehow taste less flavorful than the bowl itself. You press and fold the fabric perfectly, knowing it will be noticed only if it's done wrong. A girl beside you mutters under her breath, "At least it's warm in here." She's right. The scalding tubs fill the air with a humid haze, and for the first time since arriving, your bones feel less like stone. The warmth is a comfort, until you realize it's not yours to keep. You're sweating through your thin shift, your skin pink from heat, and the moment you leave the washroom, the cold hallway bites like a vengeful ghost. Evening comes. You're allowed to carry clean linens to the infirmary, a long corridor of the sick and nearly forgotten. You pass rows of beds, and for a moment, you catch your reflection in a pane of cloudy glass. Your face is a stranger's. Not because it's changed, though it has, with new angles of fatigue, but because of how expressionless it has become. You look like everyone else in here, trying not to be seen, not to care, not to break. You place a stack of blankets on a shelf and turn to leave, but an old man reaches out from one of the cots, his hand like dried twigs. "Thank you," he whispers. You freeze. You haven't heard those words since arriving. "Don't forget who you are," he adds. Then he lets go. You walk out fast, your throat tight. You don't cry. Not because you don't want to, but because crying here would feel too loud. Back in the dormitory, someone has scrawled a few words into the underside of a bunk slat. "Still me inside. Still me." You stare at it. You lie down beneath it. You wonder how long ago it was written, and whether that person ever made it out. You're still you too, you think. But it's hard to tell where you ends and workhouse begins. There's a rhythm to survival here. A slow, trudging beat that keeps you moving just enough to avoid collapse. Today, that rhythm changes, barely, but enough to notice. You're told there's a new task for the day, peeling potatoes. A break from laundry, but not a break from drudgery. You're led to a stone-floored kitchen with high, soot-stained windows and a chill that doesn't care it's supposed to be indoors. The air smells like boiled everything. A long table sits in the center, covered with sacks of rough-skinned, dirt-clinging potatoes. Buckets of cloudy water sit waiting for peelings. No one speaks. You pick up a knife, dull and chipped. Your hands are still raw from laundry duty. Every motion stings. The first potato is misshapen and knobby, like it's actively trying to resist being peeled. Across from you, a boy, 12, maybe, works silently with practiced speed. He looks up briefly, catches your eye, and offers a tiny smirk. "They don't cook em no better peeled," he mutters. A joke. A tiny flicker of humor. It startles you. You nod, then force a grin. "At least you can chew them," you say, and he chuckles quietly. It's not much, but it's something. You settle into the task. Slice, turn, peel, drop. Repeat. There's something hypnotic about it. And in that haze, your mind starts to drift. You remember how potatoes used to mean French fries. Curly fries. That smell of grease at a train station snack stall. You remember peeling them at home with a peeler that actually worked, next to a kitchen window with sunlight streaming in. Here, the only sun is a pale square high on the wall. It never quite touches the floor. As you peel, a matron enters with a stack of tin bowls. Soup line's running late. Keep going till you hear the bell. The soup line. That phrase is almost comical, except the soup is never really soup. It's more like vegetable regrets in hot water. But it's something warm, and right now, that counts for more than taste. The boy across from you leans in again. They say if you steal a raw one and hide it, you get the runs so bad you'll be scrubbing your own mess for days. You raise your eyebrows. So, don't steal the potatoes. He shrugs. Or do. Depends how badly you want a day off. That's the thing about the workhouse, logic folds in on itself. Pain becomes permission. Hunger becomes humor. Even punishment becomes a kind of freedom, twisted though it is. Historians still argue whether Victorian workhouses were primarily punitive or just tragically incompetent at compassion. You're starting to think it doesn't matter. Either way, you're stuck in the middle of the experiment. By midday, your shoulders ache from leaning forward. The table is lined with little towers of peeled potatoes, and your fingers feel like they've been shaved thinner than the skins you've removed. Then the bell rings. You line up with the others, holding your dented bowl. One ladle, no eye contact, keep moving. The soup sloshes into your dish with a sound like someone sighing underwater. You sit on a bench so narrow it's basically a balance beam and begin spooning it up. It's hot, which is its best quality. The flavor is, mostly absence. There are traces of turnip, maybe a memory of carrot. Someone says they saw a pea. Just one. Still, it fills your stomach. And that's more than you could say yesterday. An older woman sits beside you. She's wrapped in a shawl with holes so large they might count as ventilation. She eats slowly, deliberately, like each bite has to be coaxed into being. After a while, she speaks. Used to be a teacher. You glance at her. Before all this, she says, gesturing vaguely at the walls. Used to teach arithmetic and reading. Then the fever took my husband. Then the rent took the house. Then the law took my children. She shrugs. Now I peel potatoes. It's not a sob story. It's a ledger entry. You nod. I worked in a store. Still in there somewhere, then, she replies. Don't let them scrub it out of you. Another reminder. Another warning, folded into ordinary conversation. Later, as you wash out your bowl and return it to the communal stack, you glance back at her. She's sitting perfectly still, staring into space as though trying to remember the alphabet she once taught to someone else's children. You don't sleep that night. Not properly. You drift in and out, half dreaming of numbers and potatoes, of chalk dust and soup bowls. You imagine walking into your old store again, but the doors won't open. They're stuck shut, and the glass is fogged. You wake up with a start, heart racing. But there's no threat. Just snoring. Just coughs. Just morning again. You sit up, touch your face, make sure it's still you. Still me inside. Still me. The morning whistle screeches again, just as you're slipping into a moment of actual sleep. It's cruel like that, this place. It waits until your guard drops, until your muscles melt for just a second, and then it yanks you back up like a fish on a hook. Today, you're back in the laundry. You trudge across the courtyard, boots scraping against frostbitten cobbles. There's a flurry of snow in the air, tiny flakes spinning like dust motes that decided to dress up. The laundry steam is visible even from outside, rolling out through gaps in the brick like the whole building is exhaling fatigue. Inside, the heat hits you like a wet towel. Everything smells of old soap and despair. But it's familiar now. That's the part that really stings, it doesn't even surprise you anymore. Your task today, mangle duty. No, not mangle as in ruin, though that's an ironic twist, but the mangle, a device with heavy rollers used to squeeze water from sheets. It looks like something a villain would tie you to in a black and white film. You feed in the fabric, crank the wheel, and try not to get your fingers caught. The girl next to you is tiny, maybe 9 years old, but she spins the crank like her life depends on it. Which, honestly, it sort of does. She doesn't speak. Just nods a greeting. Her eyes are huge in her thin face, and her hands are already wrapped in cloth bandages. You don't ask why. A matron stomps past, nodding at your pace. Keep it steady. No folds. They send it back if it creases. You nod, of course. You always nod now. Hours pass. You find yourself humming, not a song, but something rhythmic. Crank forward. Reverse. Fold. Crank again. Your shoulders burn, and sweat makes the inside of your collar itchy. But it's better than yesterday. At least your feet aren't numb. As the morning crawls by, you start to learn some tricks. If you press the corners down just so, the sheets won't twist. If you shift your grip, the crank doesn't bite your wrist. And if you imagine this is all part of a fitness boot camp, it almost feels like a spin class from hell. Burn those calories, Victorians, you whisper to yourself, too low for anyone to hear. A chuckle erupts beside you. The little girl heard it. She flashes a grin, crooked and missing 2 teeth. Her name, you learn later, is Mabel. Her mother died in childbirth. Her father brought her here and left her, for her own good. He never came back. She doesn't remember what a real bed feels like. You find that the conversations you're able to have now, here, are shorter. Not because you lack things to say, but because time eats all the words before they're fully formed. Every sentence is rationed, like everything else. Historians still argue whether child labor in Victorian workhouses was a necessity born of desperation or a symptom of systemic cruelty. That's a phrase you once read online, probably while sitting on your couch with a snack in hand. Now, watching Mabel crank that iron monster with bruised fingers, you can tell you're living the answer. Lunch today is a crust of bread and half a boiled onion. Honestly, the onion is the better half. You sit with the same group as yesterday. The boy from the potato line is there, elbows on knees, chewing slowly as if the bread might change flavor if he waits long enough. The older woman, Miss Carter, you now know, is darning a sock with bits of string that once held sugar sacks together. No one speaks for a while. Just the sound of chewing, slurping, quiet sighs. Then, from down the table, someone murmurs, "Did you hear about the rats?" You perk up, mid-bite. "They've started stealing matches," the man says. He's gaunt, with sharp cheekbones and a nose that looks like it's been broken twice. "Matches?" Miss Carter raises an eyebrow. The man nods. "Swear it." One bloke saw a rat drag a whole box into a crack in the wall. Either they're building a campfire or they've figured out how to barter. You laugh before you can stop yourself. A real, sharp laugh. Mabel joins in, then the boy. Even Miss Carter smiles faintly. Maybe they'll unionize, you say, and demand better cheese. More laughter. Light, silly, completely out of place. And yet, it helps. These little absurdities become precious. Survival isn't just about calories and clean water. It's about mental insulation. About bubble wrapping your soul so it doesn't crack. Later, you return to the laundry and find your place at the mangle again. The crank feels heavier now, your arms slower. But the memory of that laughter keeps you warmer than the steam. As you roll another sheet, you catch your reflection in a wet windowpane, blurred and distorted, but unmistakably you. Paler. Gaunter. But still you. And for some strange reason, you feel proud. Proud that you're still here. Still rolling, still peeling, still joking about rats. Maybe that's what the workhouse can't quite crush. That last little flicker. Afternoon sun filters in weakly through the grimy windows, though calling it sun is generous. It's more like the idea of sunlight, vaguely golden, mostly diluted. You return from the mangle with arms like lead and fingers pink from friction. You've been reassigned again. This time, stone breaking. No one pretends it's for any useful purpose. The stones you smash don't get used for roads or buildings. It's punishment work. Pure, distilled busy work. And today, it's your turn. You're led out to a walled yard. Cold wind cuts across your cheek like paper. Around you, a dozen others squat on low stools, each with a small mallet and a pile of stones in front of them. The rules are simple. Hit the stone until it's gravel. Then start over. A man with red knuckles and a permanently furrowed brow points to your pile and mutters, "No talking. No slouching." They check your pile before tea. You sit. You pick up your hammer. You stare at the first stone. It stares back, smugly. You bring the hammer down. Thunk. A chip flies off, but the stone remains mostly intact. It's going to be a long day. As you fall into the rhythm of smashing, your thoughts drift. It's funny how the brain does that, finds patterns in punishment. The noise becomes hypnotic, like a heartbeat. Thunk. Crack. Thunk. Crack. You think about your shoes, and how the sole of the left one is peeling. You think about the boy from the soup line and wonder if he'll still be here next week. You think about your phone, remember that? A sleek rectangle that held the world. Now you'd give your last crust for one decent podcast. Next to you, an old man is working faster than anyone else. His pile of gravel is growing steadily, like a grave for giants. His eyes are bloodshot but clear, and his wrists move like metronomes. Used to break stone in the army, he whispers, without looking over. Now I break it for free. You smile politely, unsure if you're allowed to reply. Back then, we had gloves, he adds, raising a blistered palm with a rueful chuckle. You glance at your own hands, raw, calloused, and starting to peel in strange places. You're starting to resemble a badly wrapped mummy. Another worker coughs violently, racking and dry. The kind of cough that sounds like it's digging for something buried deep. Consumption, maybe. The word feels Victorian in itself, so quaint and so deadly. There's an open debate among historians about whether stonebreaking was chosen for its disciplinary effectiveness or simply because it kept idle hands busy. Either way, you can confirm, it's miserable. But here's the strange bit, it's also meditative. No thinking required. No fear of creasing sheets or measuring gruel. Just one job. One stone. One hit. You remember a fact you once read. Queen Victoria herself expressed concern about workhouse conditions, at least on paper. "It is dreadful," she supposedly said. And yet, the system kept going. You suspect that's a theme with empires, awareness without intervention. A matron passes by and inspects your pile. She squats down, pokes the stones with a stick like she's tasting them with her eyes. Then she stands and nods once. "Not bad. Try to go faster." You nod. Of course you nod. Your arm is shaking by the time you've halved your pile. Shoulders aching, sweat prickling under your shirt, even though it's cold enough to see your breath. Still, you find your groove again. Crack. Flick. Breathe. A small group of children is brought through the yard. They're just observing today, maybe some punishment for petty misbehavior. One girl sticks out in your mind. Pale, freckles across her nose, hair chopped unevenly at the jaw. She stares at you with wide, horrified eyes, as though she's looking at a ghost. You almost want to whisper to her, "Run." But she's already being ushered onward. Break time comes, if you can call it that. 10 minutes. You're given warm water, not tea, just water, and a piece of bread so dry it makes your throat feel like sandpaper. You sit beside the army man, who rubs his knees as if they're radio dials. Name's Finch, he mutters. Been here 3 winters. You blink. You've lost track of time. Days feel like weeks. Weeks like fog. New, you reply. He nods. You'll harden up. Or fall apart. Helpful. Still, Finch gives you half his crust without being asked. Chew slow, he advises. Fools the belly. The break ends with a bell that sounds suspiciously like the one used for feeding pigs. Back to the rocks. You pick up your hammer and keep going. By now, your fingertips have gone numb. The wind has kicked up again, swirling dust and tiny flakes of snow across the courtyard. One lands on your lip and melts instantly. You imagine it's a flavor of freedom. Just for a second. And then you strike again. Toward the end of the shift, you notice the girl with freckles again. She's back, peeking through the yard's wooden gate. One of the matrons scolds her sharply and pulls her away. But not before she mouths a word at you. You don't catch it, could be help, could be why, could be sorry. You'll never know. As you dump your last pile of gravel into the designated bucket, Finch pats your shoulder. Not bad, he says. That's the highest compliment you've received all week. As the bell rings for tea, you wipe your palms on your trousers and try to stretch out your back. Every vertebra protests. But you made it through another task. Stone by stone. You shuffle back inside with the others, legs stiff and lips chapped from the cold. The warmth of the workhouse isn't exactly comforting, it smells of boiled linen and bodies, but after hours in the stone yard, even a drafty hallway feels like a hug. Dinner is waiting in the canteen. Or, more accurately, evening gruel. A tepid, grayish slurry that tastes faintly of oats and deeply of regret. You join the queue behind Finch, who's humming an off-key tune about onions. You don't ask. One scoop, one hunk of bread, one spoon. You carry your tray like a relic, avoiding the eyes of those already seated. You find a corner and settle in. Across from you sits a boy, younger than you but with the eyes of someone much older. He eats like he's timing himself, fast and robotic, barely chewing. You recognize him. He was the one scrubbing the laundry benches yesterday. He glances up, and you nod politely. You break stone today, he asks. You nod again. Your hands'll puff like boiled sausages in the morning, he adds, not unkindly. You get used to it. Someone coughs behind you. The kind of cough that rattles the soul. You notice a woman, maybe middle-aged, maybe older, hard to tell, rocking gently with a blanket around her shoulders. She's had it for weeks, the boy says. Won't move her, though. They say if she can stand, she can stay. Historians still argue whether workhouses were meant to punish or simply contain, you murmur aloud. The boy shrugs. Don't matter when you're in them. You chuckle softly. He's not wrong. Tonight's treat. No chores after dinner. Some sort of religious observance has cleared the schedule. You're told to gather in the chapel. Yes, the workhouse has a chapel, and you all file in, silent as sleepwalkers. The room is dimly lit by stubby candles and smells overwhelmingly of beeswax and mold. You settle on a hard wooden bench near the back. A man in faded black robes steps forward. He isn't quite a priest, more like a designated holy delegate. His voice drones like a saw on old wood. You lose the thread quickly, the words turning to background fuzz. But here's the thing about that chapel, the silence inside it feels different. Not like the fearful silence of the dormitory or the impatient silence of the soup queue. It's weightier. Almost sacred. You notice the girl with the freckles 2 rows ahead. She's sitting stiffly, hands folded, eyes wide. She's trying hard to look invisible. The sermon ends with a hymn. You're handed a flimsy booklet with lyrics in tight cursive. No music. Just words. You mumble along with everyone else, catching only fragments: deliver us, the meek shall, something or other. Afterward, you linger, just a second, before filing out again. The candlelight makes the stone walls glow faintly golden. It's the prettiest the building has ever looked. Back in your corridor, a matron is performing checks. She taps the wooden floor with a cane as she walks. Tap. 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 A Victorian heartbeat. You make your way to your cot. The blanket smells like damp straw and long-faded sweat. You lie down. Your entire body is one stiff ache. Someone nearby is whispering a bedtime prayer. Finch is already snoring gently. You hear the distant scrape of rats in the walls. Suddenly, movement. You open your eyes slightly. The girl with freckles is being led down the corridor. Not to the children's dorm. Not toward the matron's room. To the basement. Your stomach tightens. No one says a word. No one even looks up. You shut your eyes again. Maybe you imagined it. The candle in the hall gutters and dies. You're left with the sound of your own heartbeat, and the cold, and the kind of silence that doesn't feel safe. They say the workhouse taught discipline, morality, and humility. But sometimes, you wonder what it really taught was obedience. That night, you dream of stone breaking. Only this time, the stones whisper secrets. And your hammer is made of bread. You wake up not knowing whether to laugh or cry. You wake stiff, sore, and vaguely disoriented. The chill has crept back into your bones during the night, settling in your spine like a squat tenant who has no plans to leave. Around you, the dormitory murmurs to life, shuffling feet, quiet coughs, someone retching faintly into a pail. Morning has arrived, and like every other one in the workhouse, it doesn't knock. You pull yourself upright. Your blanket has somehow tangled itself around your legs like a seaweed trap. Finch is already up and lacing his boots with the grim focus of a man preparing for battle. He offers you a nod, then winces. Back feels like it's been kneaded by a horse, he mutters. A whistle blows somewhere down the hall. Time to assemble. You line up again in the corridor, shoulders squared, eyes low. The matron walks the row with her ever-tapping cane, inspecting hands, hair, and faces with surgical disdain. She stops at a boy who clearly hasn't combed his hair properly. She sighs. "Do you wish to appear as an animal?" she asks him. The boy, maybe 10, says nothing. She yanks a comb from her pocket and rakes it once through his hair. You see him flinch. She moves on without another word. You're funneled into the canteen for breakfast, if that's what it can be called. A ladleful of gruel, barely thicker than yesterday's dinner, and a sliver of hard cheese that looks like it's seen more history than most monarchs. You eat automatically, jaw sore, mind half asleep. Today, you're not going to the stone yard. You've been reassigned. This happens often. The overseers like to shuffle the labor assignments, perhaps as a form of psychological enrichment. You overheard one say, it keeps them from growing roots. As if roots were the enemy. You're heading to the laundry. Now, here's something historians still argue about: whether Victorian workhouse laundries were symbols of domestic virtue or mechanized torture chambers with soap bubbles. You'll soon form your own opinion. The laundry is a humid, deafening cavern of iron tubs, wringing machines, and steam that smells faintly of despair and strongly of lie. Women and older girls are elbow-deep in gray water, sleeves rolled up, faces streaked with sweat. The laundry mistress, built like a stone wall and just as expressive, hands you a wooden paddle. Stir, she barks. Clockwise. Not too quick. Don't splash. You obey, gripping the worn handle like it's a lifeline. The tub you're working contains shirts so stiff they could march on their own. You stir. And stir. And stir. Occasionally, you glance around. The girl with freckles is here too, wringing sheets near the back. She doesn't look up. Her arms are slick with water, her lips pursed in tight concentration. She seems smaller today. Then someone screams. A girl maybe 14, thin as a rail, has caught her finger in a wringer. Blood blooms in the water like watercolor paint. The machine is halted, the finger extracted. She's led away, whimpering. No one says much. Injuries are common. So are infections. Don't stop stirring, the laundry mistress snaps at you, you resume. The wooden paddle now feels like it weighs 10 pounds. Your arms are trembling. The steam fogs your vision, dampens your clothes, and presses into your skin like a second, hotter layer. Eventually, a bell rings. Lunch. Today's main event, suet pudding with precisely 0 suet in it. But there's a spot of jam on top. You don't know whether it's a mistake or a reward. You decide not to ask and just eat it quietly. Back in the laundry, you're reassigned to folding dried linens. You're shown how to crease precisely, with edges aligned like they're preparing to pass a military inspection. You get it wrong at first. You're corrected without words, just a cold look and a redo. In the corner of the laundry room, a girl is hand-washing baby clothes. You hadn't realized infants were housed here. You ask about it. Sometimes unmarried mothers, someone whispers. Sent here when they're caught. Some leave with nothing. Some leave without the baby. You fold faster, suddenly conscious of the silence. Later in the day, you're given a brief reprieve to empty slop buckets. You carry one down the corridor and into the courtyard. As you pass, you catch a glimpse of a wall mural, an old painted slogan nearly rubbed out by time, "Work is redemption." You're not sure if it's meant to be comforting or sarcastic. Either way, it doesn't quite land. That night, you return to the dormitory half-drenched in laundry stink, hands raw from soap, head spinning from steam. You think you'll fall asleep instantly, but something keeps you awake. You think about the girl with the wringer injury. You think about the freckled one, folding sheets with haunted precision. You think about the baby clothes. You think about what would happen if you refused to work. If you sat down and said no. Probably the same thing that happens to anyone who does, they disappear for a few days, and when they return, they fold faster. The cots creak. A rat scampers. Somewhere nearby, someone's quietly crying into their pillow. The lights dim to darkness, and your final thought before sleep is not about freedom or rebellion. It's about how you hope tomorrow, they assign you to folding. At least it's dry work. You awaken once again to the sound of the matron's cane, clicking down the line of iron cots like some grim metronome of discipline. Your limbs ache, as always. The air is sour with breath and mildew, and your shirt still feels faintly damp from yesterday's slog in the laundry. But today is different. Not easier, of course. Just different. As you file out and down the corridor, you overhear Finch mutter that the doctor is doing rounds today. He's not a real doctor, someone whispers back. Just a surgeon's apprentice who failed his exam. Still, the prospect of medical attention, however questionable, is cause for mild excitement. You haven't seen a proper doctor since, well, possibly ever. But first, breakfast. Gruel. Again. Slightly more solid this time, but still gray, still joyless. You eat automatically, like a coal chute taking in fuel. Around you, the others do the same. Then comes the summons. You're escorted, one by one, to the infirmary, a room that smells of iodine, vinegar, and damp cotton. Rows of beds line the walls, most of them filled with the very old or the very unlucky. You're called forward. The doctor, A tall man with a graying beard and eyes that seem more bored than cruel, motions for you to sit on a stool. Name, he asks. You give it. He doesn't write it down. Any symptoms? You pause. What to say? That your back feels like it's been used for target practice. That your lungs taste faintly of soot. That sleep never quite feels like rest. He squints into your mouth, taps your ribs, listens to your chest with a brass stethoscope that's cold enough to summon ghosts. Strong enough for work, he mutters, then waves you away. You almost laugh. Almost. Now, historians still argue whether workhouse medical care was a bare minimum effort to maintain laborers, or a sincere, if poorly executed, gesture toward public health. Based on the 10 seconds you just experienced, you're leaning toward the former. Back in the corridor, you're redirected, this time not to the laundry or the stone yard, but the sewing room. Apparently, today's theme is delicate tasks, aching hands. The sewing room is quieter, filled with women and girls bent over mending coats, shirts, uniforms. The room smells faintly of wool and lamp oil. You're handed a bundle of torn trousers and a needle. Patch the knees, the supervisor says. Use tiny stitches. No bunching. You sit beside an elderly woman who appears to be sewing by muscle memory alone, eyes nearly closed. You'll want to double knot, she murmurs, not looking up. Otherwise they'll fray again. You nod and try. Your hands fumble. The needle resists you. The thread tangles like it knows you're new. Still, the work is calm, compared to laundry. No scalding water, no crushed fingers. Just time, thread, and silence broken only by the occasional snip of scissors. Someone hums. It's off-key, but oddly comforting. At lunch, a small miracle, bread that isn't entirely stale and a slice of cold boiled potato. No jam this time, but you find you don't mind. You eat in silence, watching the way the freckled girl tucks her crust into a cloth scrap to save for later. She catches your eye and shrugs. For the baby wing, she says simply. You didn't know she had a baby here. She doesn't say more, and neither do you. The afternoon brings a lesson. A surprise, given that most of your days revolve around labor, not learning. You're led into a room with benches and a chalkboard, where a man in spectacles reads from the Bible and then switches, with no real transition, to arithmetic drills. 3 times 7, he snaps. 21, the children chorus. You're the oldest in the room by far, but you repeat the answers quietly, half embarrassed and half grateful to exercise a different muscle. The numbers comfort you. They're predictable. Definite. They do not shift like rules or moods or overseers. The teacher pauses near you. You know how to write? He asks. You nod. He nods back, just once. Help the younger ones. Some haven't held chalk before. And so you do. A boy beside you, maybe 6, tries to draw a number 2 but ends up making something that looks like a melting swan. You guide his hand, slowly. Carefully. He looks up at you and smiles with one missing front tooth. There's a strange peace in that moment. Of course, it doesn't last. Back in the dormitory that night, someone has lice. This discovery is followed by immediate chaos, bedding stripped, hair shaved, shirts boiled in vats of vinegar. Even those unaffected, like you, are forced into cold water baths and given a foul-smelling powder to rub into your scalp. There's no privacy. No dignity. Just shrieks and shivering and the acrid scent of antiseptic shame. Finch ends up getting his hair shaved. I look like a half-plucked chicken, he grumbles. You don't argue. As lights out draws near, you lie in your cot, head still itching from the powder, arms still sore from sewing. Somewhere in the distance, someone coughs, a deep, rattling sound that echoes through the hall. You don't know whether it's the start of illness or just another workhouse cough, born from soot and cold and sorrow. But you realize this, you haven't looked at a clock all day. Time here is measured in chores and mealtimes, in whistles and bells, not in minutes or hours. You exist in a sort of gray loop. And yet, somehow, you've survived another day. You don't know what time it is when you're shaken awake, but it's dark, and the lamps in the corridor haven't been lit yet. A thin boy from the next cot whispers, "Wake up. Fire drill." You're not sure if he's joking, he usually is, but then you smell it, a faint, sharp scent, like scorched cloth or burning dust. Your heart lurches. Sleepy confusion vanishes. Everyone's moving. Turns out it's not a fire, just smoke from a chimney flue that's clogged again. Still, the smell has set everyone's nerves on edge, and the matron uses the opportunity to scold everyone about readiness and God's judgment before sending you all out into the chilly courtyard for a roll call under the stars. You're barefoot. The flagstones are icy. You hop from foot to foot like it's a game, trying not to wince, and somewhere behind you, Finch mutters, "Maybe we should have let it burn." You're not allowed back inside for nearly an hour. No blankets, no shoes. Just the moon, the cold, and your breath puffing like a ghost's. It's a sort of punishment drill now, an extra reminder that comfort is a privilege, not a right. When you finally do go back in, your cot is half damp from the cold night air, and there's a fresh layer of soot on your pillow. You sleep badly, dreaming of smoke and endless staircases. The next morning begins as if none of it happened. That's the workhouse for you. Each day erases the last, like chalk wiped from a slate. Today, you're assigned to the kitchen. That might sound like a treat, until you meet the cook. Mrs. Grindle is an ancient woman with arms like rolling pins and a scowl that could curdle milk. She greets you by pointing at a sack of turnips and saying, "Peel." You peel. 4 hours. You begin to believe there is no end to turnips. Your hands cramp. The knife is blunt. A boy beside you cuts his finger and is scolded for bleeding on the food. Sanitation isn't really a concern here, efficiency is. At one point, Mrs. Grindle eyes you and mutters, "Too slow. They'll be old before you finish." You don't reply. You've learned. Silence is safer. Eventually, you're moved to the back hearth, where an enormous iron pot bubbles ominously. The soup, if one can call it that, is mostly water, a few onions, and something that may once have been a bone. You stir it with a ladle the size of a cricket bat, inhaling the steam that tastes faintly of salt and regret. And yet, when the bowls are filled and passed out, the children devour the stuff like it's treasure. Hunger does that. You're allowed a small ladle for yourself. You drink it slowly, letting it warm your insides. Historians still debate whether Victorian workhouse kitchens were truly underfunded or just grossly mismanaged. Based on your brief culinary career, you'd suggest both. You've seen better food in alleyway bins. After lunch, you're marched out to the garden. Not for leisure, don't get ideas. It's time to weed the vegetable beds and clear muck from the pig pens. Yes, there are pigs. 4 of them. You envy them. They have warm straw and regular slop. You, on the other hand, are elbow-deep in compost, digging up roots with your bare hands because no one bothered to fetch spades. The smell is something between a cow's backside and a wet sock left in a drawer for a decade. A few of the girls sing while they work, mostly rude songs about the matron. One girl, the freckled one with the baby, has a voice like wind through a keyhole. It's haunting. You don't know the words, but you hum along anyway. Suddenly, you hear shouting near the back gate. A delivery cart has arrived. Sacks of flour, crates of withered apples, and bundles of donated clothes. Everyone eyes the clothes. New garments are rare and prized. You're roped into unloading, and it feels briefly like Christmas. Until you realize, new clothes just mean slightly less tattered than yours. Still, a change is a change. You trade your threadbare shirt for one only mildly holy, and feel like royalty. As the sun sets, a surprise announcement is made: tonight is hymn night. You file into the assembly hall, where benches have been dragged into rows and an old upright piano has been wheeled in, presumably from the last century. The keys are yellowing, and a few don't work, but the girl playing knows how to coax tunes from broken things. The hymns are familiar: Abide with Me, Rock of Ages, and though your voice isn't much, you join in. There's something oddly soothing in the communal noise. Everyone sways slightly. Even the matron looks less terrifying by lamplight. And as strange as it is, you feel content. For just a moment. Then it ends. You're sent back to bed, of course. But tonight, your cot is dry. Your belly, not quite empty. Your hair, not crawling. It's practically a luxury suite. You lie there, eyes open in the dark, listening to the last faint note of him echoing in your mind. Something like hope flickers in your chest. You're still here. And somehow, that's enough. You wake the next morning not to bells or shouting, but to a rare kind of stillness. Sunlight filters through the cracked window above your cot, casting stripes on the wall like prison bars made of gold. Outside, birds are actually singing, loud, joyful chirps that feel wildly out of place in this world of starch and scoldings. Today, something is different. The ward is quieter. The matron is missing. The usual smell of boiled something doesn't hit you in the face the moment you sit up. In fact, no one comes to herd you out of bed immediately. You sit there, blinking, wondering if you've died and just haven't noticed. But then a boy wanders in, half-dressed, and says, "Inspection day." Ah. That explains it. Inspection day is when the workhouse tries to look respectable. Someone important, a local official, a charity board member, or once, allegedly, a cousin of the Queen, comes to tour the place. Which means, everyone scrubs. Everything shines. You are suddenly part of a very elaborate, very desperate lie. You're handed a brush and told to scrub the corridor floor. "Until I can see my face in it," says Mrs. Grindle, who seems to have taken on new authority today. You scrub until your knees ache. There's soap in your nose. Your shirt gets soaked and stiff. But the floor gleams like a mirror. If mirrors smelled faintly of cabbage. They march you to the washing room next. Hands are cleaned. Faces are polished. Hair is roughly combed with a communal brush that has likely seen too many scalps. You're given a clean, well, cleaner smock to wear. And then you're told to smile. That's the hardest part. The inspector arrives around noon. He's not nearly as regal as you expected, just a man with a stiff collar and a clipboard, trailing two assistants who murmur things like adequate and minimal infestation. They poke through cupboards. They ask questions. They nod a lot. You're instructed to sit on a stool and look agreeable. So you sit, and you smile, and you think about pigs again. The inspector leans over and says, "You doing well here, lad?" You nod. You say, "Yes, sir." You lie. Historians still argue whether inspections were genuine attempts to improve conditions, or merely ceremonial. Based on today, you're leaning toward performance art. But the upside? You're fed early and given seconds, for appearance's sake. You savor every bite of that extra slice of bread like it's a royal banquet. As afternoon settles in, the inspectors leave, and the illusion collapses. The real workhouse returns. Grimy, strict, weary. But for a few hours, you glimpsed something gentler. And now it's time to clean up after the cleaning. You're back in the washroom, draining basins, scraping dried soap, wringing out rags. It's dull, repetitive work, but there's a rhythm to it. You fall into that rhythm, your body moving while your mind drifts. You think of home. Or what you remember of it. You think of your name, not the nickname they use here, but your real name. You think of how it sounded when someone kind used to say it. You think of what's next. No one stays here forever. Eventually, you're old enough to work outside, factories, farms, or, if you're lucky, an apprenticeship. If you survive. If no cough becomes consumption. If no accident leaves you limping. If you don't break under the weight of sameness. But you're still here. And that means you might get out. As the sun sets, the last chores are done. Supper is thin again, but it warms your stomach. The matron returns, grumpier than ever. You dodge her gaze. You're sent to bed, same as always. But tonight, just before the lamps are blown out, something odd happens. The freckled girl with the baby. She smiles at you. Not a smirk. Not a sneer. A real smile. It's quick. Easy to miss. But you saw it. And in that moment, you realize something strange, you're not alone. Not really. Everyone here, the boys with hollow cheeks, the girls who hum while sweeping, the old man who mutters in his sleep, they're all surviving too. Quietly. Together. And somehow, in the cracks of this cruel place, a kind of resilience grows. Like weeds in the stone. You lie back, staring at the ceiling, and let your breath slow. The day is done. You survived it. And tomorrow? You'll survive that, too. So now, with the lamps snuffed and the corridors quiet, your mind drifts into a softer space. You feel the thin blanket on your chest, the straw mattress rustling beneath your limbs, and the faint hum of breath from the beds around you. The workhouse fades, not gone, just dimmed, like the last glowing ember in a fireplace long gone cold. Let your muscles sink into stillness. Let the scrape of turnips, the clang of tin bowls, the distant mutterings of the matron, all those edges of the day, fade away like smoke in early morning mist. Imagine, just for a moment, stepping outside that tall iron gate. The cobbled street stretching ahead. The sky wide and bright with promise. Your feet stepping forward, not because someone ordered it, but because you chose to move. To walk. To become something more than a number in a ledger. You don't need to know how it ends, not tonight. Not now. All you need is this moment. This hush. This warm drift of story and sleep. Breathe gently. Deeper now. You're safe here, in the quiet. The world can wait. And whether you wake up in your own bed or still inside those crumbling stone walls, know this, you're strong. You are still here. Still here.